Becoming is the life story of Michelle Obama, a humbling journey of growth, discovery, and above all, perseverance. The book begins with her childhood, walks through her years of schooling, meeting Barack Obama, and eventually depicts what life looked like through the eyes of the First Lady of the United States. It's more than a memoir, however, as there are many noteworthy key points. Becoming explains that it's possible to become anything through hard work, an ambitious attitude, and always pushing through the difficulties of life. Becoming a wife takes love, dedication, and compromise. Becoming a mother takes more love, sacrifice, and admitting you don't have all the answers. Everything it takes to become more can be uncomfortable and will be challenging. But the efforts to become are always worth it. Questions this book answers. 1. Can a person become more than what they were born into? 2. What can I do to make my marriage work? 3. How do I become a good mother? 4. How do I overcome challenges in life? Michelle Obama is an example of someone who made the most with her opportunities. Black families in the 60 seconds and 70 seconds, while free from slavery themselves, had family members whose parents had been slaves. Most black families during that time still felt like second-class citizens, and though Michelle's immediate family was considered middle class, the stigma of being black still existed. Michelle was raised on the south side of Chicago, an area that is now considered ghetto. Her family lived in a small space on the second floor of her aunt's house, where she shared a room with her brother Craig. Michelle's parents never let their children feel oppressed because of their race. They always told their children to push harder than their peers and encouraged them to make logical, educated decisions. Michelle always strove to be the best in school, wanting to be better and smarter than her fellow students. Having an ambitious attitude carried her through grade school and into elite programs and institutions that not many black students attended. Perseverance made her stronger, getting her through 4 grueling years at Princeton and then through several more years of law school. Michelle Obama accepted every opportunity she was presented. As a young Princeton college student, she began a work study as the assistant to the director of the Third World Center, a foundation that had been founded to help support students of color. Princeton was a predominantly white campus, so the TWC gave students of color a place to connect with each other. It was a safe place to be themselves. Working at the TWC also helped Michelle learn to overcome those fears herself, to value herself more not just as a black person, but as a black woman. During her time at the TWC, Michelle would babysit the director's son several days a week. She asked her one day if she ever considered starting an after-school daycare for children. That question propelled Michelle into doing just that. She watched several children a day, the kids of other TWC staff members. She earned extra money and gained experience with kids, which she would use later in life. Michelle had always dealt with what other people thought of her, because of the way she talked, looked, acted, and, eventually, because of who she married. Being a black woman at Princeton was not the first time she had felt different, but it was a striking difference, nonetheless. It was as if people were always looking at her, judging her for the color of her skin or the way she was dressed. Even if some of it may have been paranoia, the fact was that she was black in a place that was predominantly white. Most of the other black students at Princeton had the same experience, so they tended to stick together. To those on the outside, this could have looked like they were purposely excluding themselves, but it really wasn't like that. It was a way to cope with the fear of being rejected because they were different. Essentially, they were giving up without even trying, and Michelle knew it wasn't the best choice. Michelle is one of those women who doesn't fit the stereotype. She had always seen herself taking the career path, but she also saw herself eventually getting married and having children. By wanting to do all of those things, she knew that, eventually, she would encounter more judgment. Michelle constantly felt the pressures of the world. The pressure to prove her race did not define her but empowered her. The pressure to prove women were smart and important, and that they belonged in the workforce. The pressure to achieve what those before her could not. Constantly asking herself, am I good enough? By the time she graduated law school, she finally was able to answer that question with a strong, confident, yes, in fact, I am. When Michelle and Barack decided to have a family, Michelle did not want to stop working. Having left the world of corporate law and entering the political world had changed everything for her. She toyed with the idea of being a stay-at-home mom, but quickly realized it wasn't the life she wanted. When Barack decided to run for president, Michelle was hit with the reality that her family's choices would be on display for the world to see. At first, she was worried, but when she realized that no matter what she did, someone was going to judge or hate. When Barack Obama decided to run for president, Michelle didn't think he could possibly win. By allowing Barack to run for president, Michelle knew she was thrusting their family, especially herself, into the spotlight. If he won, she would be expected to look and act a certain way as the First Lady. This meant more worry for Michelle, worry that she'd be uprooting her children, worry over adapting to life as First Lady, and worry over what the presidency would do to their marriage. A full year ahead of the election, the campaigning began, Barack campaigning in one area and Michelle in another. The weeks were grueling, and Michelle learned the hard way that anything she said or did could be taken out of context and spun to make her husband look bad. After one of her speeches, Michelle was painted as an angry black woman, even though she didn't think anything she'd said was wrong. The night of the 2008 election, Barack's campaign staff had booked an entire hotel floor to watch the polls. Michelle was fraught with nerves, but Barack seemed composed. Hours passed before it was announced that he had won. Being the First Lady came with expectations. Previous First Ladies stood by their husbands' sides, smiling and supporting, but did not interfere with the presidential work. Michelle did not want to waste her opportunity. She was determined to use the power she had, subtly but effectively, while also being present for her daughters. Their comfort and safety was her first priority. Once they were settled, her work could begin. She started several programs, the first one starting with a garden at the White House. The hope was that if the first family could eat healthily, so, too, could the rest of the country. Empowering girls to better themselves was another passionate area for Michelle. As a woman, she knew how difficult it could be to become more than a stereotype. Eventually, with Barack's help, she would get funding for several programs to help students that were underprivileged, as well as a program for girls. By the time they left the White House, Michelle was able to walk away knowing they had done some good in the country. Being the first black family in the White House was the change America needed, and enough people had wanted it bad enough to vote on it. It was a trend she wanted to continue even after they were gone.